morning, you're watching Business World Live. I'm Danny Laurel.
And I'm Jess De Los Santos. Here are the biggest stories to kickstart this trading day, Tuesday. Oil companies slashed their pump prices for the first time this year, following 11 straight weeks of price increases. But today's big-time rollback is not enough to offset the previous rounds of price hikes.
Telcos, airlines, and other key industries will now be open to full foreign ownership. That's after President Duterte signed into law the amendments to the Public Services Act.
Business groups urge employees to return to the workplace, saying this will help boost economic recovery.
And the Philippines returns to the international debt market by offering bonds amounting to at least $500 million. We begin our broadcast with oil firms slashing their pump prices following price hikes that lasted for 11 consecutive weeks.
Now, the rollback, which took effect earlier this morning, is the first for 2022. However, the big-time adjustment was not enough to offset previous price increases. Diesel prices decreased by 11 pesos and 45 centavos a liter. Year-to-date, the net increase in diesel prices now amount to 19 pesos and 20 centavos. Meanwhile, gasoline prices are down by 5 pesos and 45 centavos per liter starting today. This brings the net increase in gas prices at 14 pesos and 90 centavos per liter.
Meanwhile, many PUV drivers have yet to receive fuel subsidies from the government.
One lawmaker wants the distribution of the aid suspended until concerns on beneficiaries have been resolved. Mon Gualvez with a story.
Many PUV drivers and operators still have not received the 6,500 peso fuel subsidy promised to them by the government. In yesterday's House Committee on Transportation hearing, transport groups noted that former operators seem to be the ones benefiting from the subsidy instead of the current franchise owners.
Maraming operator na nagbenta ng unit, lalong-lalo na before pandemic pa po. So ngayon po, yung pong mga may-ari ng mga jeepney ngayon na tumatakbo, nakaka-renew pa rin po ng kanilang franchise kahit hindi na po sila yung may-ari, Mr. Chair. Ang problema namin, wala pong card na hawak yung mga nakabili ng mga unit. Dahil nga hindi na po tumatanggap.
The Transportation Department denies involvement in this supposed scheme. LTFRB Chairman Martin Delgra also believes that this problem has already been addressed by as early as August 2016.
It's a matter of policy. And obviously, it's against public policy. Hindi po pwedeng ibebenta at pagkikitaan yung prangkisa. We have already addressed that issue a long time ago.
On the other hand, Pasang Mazda's Obet Martin appealed to the operators to allow drivers to directly receive the fuel subsidy.
Kung matanggap ng operator ang card, ipagkaloob nila sa mga driver nila yan. Hindi para sa operator, para po sa driver yan.
Abang Lingkod Party List Representative Joseph Paduano suggests the suspension of subsidy distribution until after all these concerns have been fixed.
I suggest, suspend muna natin, Mr. Chairman, unless ma-clear out natin yung mga qualified beneficiaries na sinasabi natin.
This proposal, however, was immediately turned down by the House Committee.
We have to stick with the process. Mas madali po. Ayaw natin bigyan ng pagkakataon na lalo't gugulo po ang LTFRB.
Since the distribution started on March 15, over 107,000 fuel subsidy cards have already been released. The department is targeting to finish distribution by end of the month. For News 5, Mon Gualvez, we are One News.
In other news, President Rodrigo Duterte has signed into law the amendments to the 85-year-old Public Service Act. Now, under Republic Act 11647, telcos, domestic shipping, railways, subways, airlines, expressways, tollways, and airports are now excluded from the definition of a public utility. This means that these sectors will now be open to full foreign ownership, as they will no longer be subjected to the 40% foreign equity cap for public utilities under the Constitution. President Duterte said the law will help boost the country's economic recovery.
I believe that through this law will attract more global investors, modernize several sectors of public service, and improve the delivery of essential services. Indeed, the enactment of this amended law, as well as the amended Foreign Investments Act, shall help stimulate the economy, especially for local businesses.
And still on efforts to aid economic recovery, various business groups and executives are urging employees to return to the workplace. In a joint statement, the groups claim that returning to workplaces such as offices will cause more business activity, which will benefit the entire nation. They also urge the public to go out of their homes while still following the minimum public health standards. All right, just when many have thought that hybrid work is here to stay after 2 years of doing remote work, business groups are now calling for a return to the workplace. To discuss that, as well as the signing of the amendments to the Public Service Act, we have George Barcelon, President of the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Good morning, Sir George. Thank you for joining us today.
Good morning, Justin. Yes, good morning.
Okay, sir, this is not the first time we're hearing this. But this time we're making it official, along with other business groups, a call for employees to return to the workplace. Does this mean we're making a complete turnaround and definitely letting go of the hybrid mode of work? And how ready are we for this, especially public transportation?
Well, I guess with what we are seeing now, especially after the December period, wherein although we were alert level 2, but it looks like alert level 1. So under alert level 1, there's a really more mobility in both, for consumer and for businesses. And we do encourage people to go back to their workplace if the numbers proves that they're more efficient. But there are companies that have implemented a hybrid, wherein some workers are allowed to work from home and some must be on the work premise. Now, this depends on the type of work from the employees. So we encourage our employers to be flexible, encourage them that if they can get their workers to report on duties, that would be the best, because that would trigger more economic activities, and that would be helpful for the MSMEs.
Okay, so you mean to say, sir, that you at least for your call, you're not exactly saying that all industries should return to a physical work setup. Does that also apply to the BPO sector? I mean, you have the industry calling on the FIRB to extend work from home arrangements for the industry, considering that they have adapted well enough to a work from home setup.
Well, with regard to the BPO, they have certain conditionalities that were imposed by the DOF because they do enjoy incentives. And for those companies, the workers must be working in a premise that is accredited, PESA accredited. But due to the COVID pandemic, the government was flexible enough to allow them to work from home. But now the situation has changed, and the government is encouraging them to go back. And we do encourage them to go back also. But some of the constraints that they are facing is that the pulling out of their IT equipments may take some time. And some of the offices that they left vacant before needs to be cleaned up and make ready with all the necessary connections. So I've been hearing that, but definitely we do encourage them to go back to work in the workplace to enjoy all the benefits that have been extended by the incentives given for those operations like that.
Sir, we had the president of IBPAP yesterday as our guest, and he actually highlighted that there might be an issue with talent retention if that happens. People like to work from home, at least some people, and he also did mention there's a productivity benefit, in fact, from the hybrid setup. Does this extend to other industries as well, not just the IT BPM sector? And is the PCCI, conscient of this fact that some people might really just prefer to work from home, and that might cause,
possible job loss.
Yeah, job losses if they are pushed to go back to in-person work?
Yes, that's true. Even in my office, I have experienced that. Nowadays, it's not really work from home. During the 18 months that we had this number of times of quarantine, the private sectors have been able to adapt to a more resilient system, and it's not necessarily work from home, but really work from anywhere. No, and what had happened was that some people, because of the problems they encounter daily in Metro Manila, the traffic and everything, they decided to move outside of Metro Manila as long as there's internet for them to perform their work. I myself, I heard from my manager that a few of them decided that if we're going to pull them back, they might just look for jobs near their home. So there is that concern, honestly. But I think to give it more time and for both employees to adjust also. You should remember during the COVID-19 pandemic, during the quarantine, the employers and the employees were able to work out systems wherein it's a win-win. The workers gets to work from their home, and the employer still gets the number. But there are certain sectors that you cannot, like construction, services, and on-site services. So they have to be going back to work, no, for the company to maximize their output. So it's a question that I think give it some time. Anyway, it's still April 1. A lot of companies will try to readjust, no, and bring back their workers back to the working premise.
Sir, what is the rationale of the NEDA pushing for a 4-day work week? And how does that tie into the objectives of the business community? Is this related to the hybrid work setup and then the new normal? Or is this a more sustainable way for people to be more productive? And in any way, is this something that the PCCI and its members are amenable to?
I think the 4-day work week that was suggested by NEDA was triggered mainly because of the sudden high price of fuel. But earlier, every week we're having increases. And because of the Russia-Ukraine war, there's a fear that the prices of crude oil would shoot up to $120 per barrel. And that would be a burden to people who commute. And I think the NEDA was projecting that and thought that if that were to happen, the money spent on commuting would take a big bite out of their salary. So they thought of maybe a 4-day week. No, again, there's some prudence to that, but I think it best to allow the management to make that decision themselves, because there are really trade-off. They're trade-off in the sense that if the pamasahe goes up, even 4 days is going to be hurting their pocket if they don't have to travel and they work from home. So there's a trade-off, and I do think that to allow management and their employees to work this out on their own, to be flexible. As I said, during the COVID pandemic, we have been able to be resilient, and workers and management were able to agree on working arrangement. Well, that's my point of view. No, I see the rationale behind the 4-day work. I also see the rationale giving the management that flexibility for them to decide. Because if it's legislated, you would lose that flexibility. The management will lose that flexibility in their work arrangement.
Okay, sir, of course, apart from the pandemic, the recent spike in fuel prices has brought to light so many concerns about labor conditions here in the country, particularly when it comes to minimum wage. There are, of course, calls to hike that, to adjust that, but response so far from the private sector has been quite lukewarm. But from your end, sir, how much of an increase do you think can the private sector afford?
Well, I couldn't give you a straight answer, no, because I think in the past any increases will have to go to the tripartite, no, and there are some cost of living indices that they based on. The management are open. We can see that when cost of groceries, has gotten too high, no, our inflation so far has been bordering around 4%, primarily because of fuel. A lot of businesses also is trying to maintain, well, some to maintain the prices, not increasing it. Because what had happened is really something external. This Russia-Ukraine war that created a sort of a shortage or in all, not only on fuel, in all commodities. Wheat, because Ukraine and Russia, they're wheat exporters, and so many other things. And it's hard to have a knee-jerk reaction when you give, I know they've been asking for 370 to 450 pesos a day. Once you give that arbitrarily, you cannot take it back. And you know that we do want to have our economy thrive on creating more jobs. If that is given, a lot of marginalized operation, they may just not to open because this is added burden on their side. So our suggestion is really let it go in the meantime. Okay, the government has been doing all its best. They're giving some sort of assistance. No, on the fuel side, they give subsidy to the public transport operator. On the other side, the poorest of the poor, as what I gather from the report of Department of Finance, there are 12 million families that needs to be given assistance. And they have budgeted, I think, 33 billion pesos. And as of late, the president said, yung 200 a month for 1 year, yung 2,400, medyo kulang pa. So sabi ni Presidente, pwede ba gawin mo ng 500 per month? So that's 6,000. So it's, I think the government and the private sector realized the difficulty the daily workers are experiencing. But this could be a temporary issue. As you can see that the war, the tone of the war in Russia and Ukraine has simmered down. And both sides have been talking about, why don't we sit down and talk? The minute they can come to an agreement, definitely all of this sudden increase in prices on fuel and commodities will taper off and will come down. Next week, or was it this week, we're going to experience reduction in oil prices. So that can happen further on.
Sir, one last question. The President has finally signed the Public Services Act yesterday, amendments. And of course, this is something that the foreign chambers had been calling for. But to what extent are the local players concerned here? Should they be concerned that, of course, there's going to be increased competition? There's also threats, particularly to national security when
Especially
it
when it
comes
comes
to
to
telco investments. And sir, are you anticipating that this might also extend to other industries that are not yet there? So for instance, energy, power, even property ownership and corporations, sir?
Yeah. Danny, in answer to that, it's not just the foreign chambers, but really the local businesses. I mean, we, PCCI and other local business organizations, has been advocating for this because, we're talking about we're entering globalization. Of course, the ratification of the RCEP has not been done. But the fact is we have to be competitive. And this area on the telecommunication and transportation and plus others have been a concern to the business sector because of its, in a way, its lack of coverage on the services and the cost of transportation. So having said that, I think, the Public Service Act would encourage more, would attract more foreign investments. And it's not just the money that they would invest, but it's the trickle-down effect, having more jobs created, innovations, increase in digital services. Just to give you a baseline, we have the third telco now, but they're not in full operations. We're a country of 110 million, archipelagic, we're spread all over 7,000 islands. And then we only, for the longest time, with two telcos. Singapore, a small country like that, has 4 or 5 telcos. Israel, I believe, has 6 telcos. Thailand has 6 telcos. Malaysia has about 5. We are really behind the curve as far as implementing or expanding the telco for the availability of the broadband throughout the archipelago. So we would like to have more players involved in this and to upgrade the services and to lower down the subscription cost. We hope that can be realized. You're talking about having this digital platform that must be the MSMEs must come on board. But if the broadband cost and availability is still a hindrance, they will always be left behind. So this is important for the country to move forward. I mean, to have this inclusivity on growth, not only for the medium-sized company, but really our concern is the 99.6% of the establishments which are micro. And telco plays an important role, and also transport for that matter.
Okay, thank you so much for that trickle-down effect indeed for increased competition. George Barcelon, President of the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry.
Now, coming right up after the break, the bellwether index fell below the 7,000 level on Monday on the back of inflation threats.
We'll take a look at how the local bourse is performing this morning when Business World Live returns. Stay with us.
You're still watching Business World Live here on One News. I'm Jess De Los Santos.
And I'm Danny Laurel.
All right, just as oil started to dip and pump prices rolled back, threats of more inflation imminent. What's the latest there, Dan?
Well, that is exactly the latest issue. Again, Jess, we thought that was over, but take a look at Brent crude, 118.89 na naman a barrel after it had already been paring back down to 100. This, of course, as Ukraine's government defiantly rejected the Russian calls for the forces in Mariupol to lay down their arms in exchange for safe passage out of the city. There are around 400,000 residents there remain trapped. And of course, this has been pushing the oil prices back up. This is also what spilled over into the markets. We do see a bit of a recovery this morning. Nevertheless, we're still below those 7,000 levels, trading up by 0.4%. Quick peek, Jess, on the sectors to be watching out for here as President Duterte signed the amendments to the Public Services Act. You've got telcos, of course, and you can see actually TEL or PLDT up by 0.8% and Globe a hefty 2.7% up. But take a look at Dito Telecom up by 5.7% this morning. Recall that they do have JV with China Telecom there. And let's take a look as well as at the infrastructure space. This, of course, as subways, railroad transportation will also be taken out. The cap of ownership from foreigners will be taken out. EEI unchanged here, but you can see IRC up by 1% and Megawide, which of course has also built several airports, up by 2.4%, Jess.
Now, and Dan, the last COVID-0 stronghold of Southeast Asia is relenting. How is that moving the markets?
Very interestingly, take a look at the Hang Seng Index, Jess. It's up by 0.6%. But look at that naman, the past 5 days jumping by 16%. This is, of course, the last, COVID-0 stronghold that we have. And we are, of course, a direct, beneficiary of this because there are a lot of OFWs from the Philippines that were banned to enter Hong Kong. And they have now lifted the ban on flights from 9 countries, including the Philippines. The quarantine has also been reduced for around 7 days. It went as much as 21 days, and they will be reopening schools. And this comes, of course, as the city, which used to be, of course, a financial hub, saw more than 54,000 people leaving just in March, 71,000 people leaving in February, and 17,000 leaving in December. So hopefully, we're going to be seeing much more activity economically, and as well as, observing that and how that would be beneficial as well for the Philippine economy, Jess.
Here are the other headlines we're keeping our eyes on. The country has returned to the international debt market for the first time this year. The government is looking to raise funds by offering global and green bonds to boost the budget for pandemic recovery. The government is looking to borrow a benchmark amount of at least $500 million through the offering of global bonds with tenors of 5 years and 10.5 years, as well as sustainable bonds with a maturity of 25 years. The settlement date is March 29.
Now, the Philippine Competition Commission has ordered Grab to distribute over 19 million pesos in refunds to users by April 22. These refunds were ordered as part of the penalty for violating a price monitoring commitment. The watchdog said that of the total 25.5 million pesos earmarked for return to Grab passengers, only about 6 million pesos has been distributed to the eligible users. But Grab insists it has already complied with the disbursement order of the PCC and has disbursed the full administrative fee. The company just reminded its users to complete the basic Know Your Customer process and redeem their portion of the fine through Grab Rewards.
And that's a first look into the business day this Tuesday, March 22, 2022. Join us again tomorrow at exactly 9:30 a.m. You can also catch us on Signal Play. Register for a free account now at www.signalplay.com and stream One News Live anytime, anywhere. I'm Jess De Los Santos.
And I'm Danny Laurel. Mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines. We are One News.